Chapter 18 of Tristram Shandy, Volume 1. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Julie van Mulligen. The Life and Opinions of Tristram Shandy, Gentleman, Volume 1, by Laurence Sterne. Chapter 18. As the point was that night agreed, or rather determined, that my mother should lie in of me in the country, she took her measures accordingly, for which purpose, when she was 3 days or thereabouts gone with child, she began to cast her eyes upon the midwife, whom you have so often heard me mention, and before the week was well got round, as the famous Dr. Manningham was not to be had, she had come to a final determination in her mind, notwithstanding there was a scientific operator within so near a call as 8 miles of us, and who, moreover, had expressly wrote a 5 shillings book upon the subject of midwifery, in which he had exposed not only the blunders of the sisterhood itself, but had likewise superadded many curious improvements for the quicker extraction of the foetus in cross-births, and some other cases of danger which belay us in getting into the world. Notwithstanding all this, my mother, I say, was absolutely determined to trust her life and mine with it into no soul's hand but this old woman's only. Now this I like, when we cannot get at the very thing we wish, never to take up with the next best in degree to it. No, that's pitiful beyond description. It is no more than a week from this very day, in which I am now writing this book, for the edification of the world, which is March 9th, 1759, that my dear Jenny, observing I looked a little grave, as she stood cheapening a silk of 25 shillings a yard, told the mercer she was sorry she had given him so much trouble, and immediately went and bought herself a yard-wide stuff of 10 pence a yard. 'Tis a duplication of one and the same greatness of soul. Only what lessened the honour of it somewhat in my mother's case was, that she could not hurry it into so violent and hazardous an extreme as one in her situation might have wished, because the old midwife had really some little claim to be depended upon, as much at least as success could give her, having in the course of a practice of near 20 years in the parish, brought every mother's son of them into the world, without any one slip or accident which could fairly be laid to her account. These facts, though they had their weight, yet did not altogether satisfy some few scruples and uneasinesses which hung upon my father's spirits in relation to this choice, to say nothing of the natural workings of humanity and justice, or of the yearnings of parental and connubial love, all which prompted him to leave as little to hazard as possible in a case of this kind. He felt himself concerned in a particular manner that all should go right in the present case, from the accumulated sorrow he lay open to, should any evil betide his wife and child in lying in at Shandy Hall. He knew the world judged by events, and would add to his afflictions in such a misfortune by loading him with the whole blame of it. Alas a day! Had Mrs. Shandy, poor gentlewoman, had but a wish in going up to town just to lie in and come down again, which they say she begged and prayed for upon her bare knees, and which, in my opinion, considering the fortune which Mr. Shandy got with her, was no such mighty matter to have complied with, the lady and her babe might both of them have been alive at this hour. This exclamation, my father knew, was unanswerable, and yet it was not merely to shelter himself, nor was it altogether for the care of his offspring and wife that he seemed so extremely anxious about this point. My father had extensive views of things, and stood, moreover, as he thought, deeply concerned in it for the public good, from the dread he entertained of the bad uses an ill-fated instance might be put to. He was very sensible that all political writers upon the subject had unanimously agreed and lamented, from the beginning of Queen Elizabeth's reign down to his own time, that the current of men and money towards the metropolis, upon one frivolous errand or another, set in so strong as to become dangerous to our civil rights, though, by the by, A current was not the image he took most delight in. A distemper was here his favourite metaphor, and he would run it down into a perfect allegory, by maintaining it was identically the same in the body national as in the body natural, where the blood and spirits were driven up into the head faster than they could find their ways down. A stoppage of circulation must ensue, which was death in both cases. There was little danger, he would say, of losing our liberties by French politics or French invasions, nor was he so much in pain of a consumption from the mass of corrupted matter and ulcerated humours in our constitution, which he hoped was not so bad as it was imagined, but he verily feared that in some violent push we should go off all at once in a state apoplexy, and then he would say, "The Lord have mercy upon us all." My father was never able to give the history of this distemper, without the remedy along with it. "Was I an absolute prince?" he would say, pulling up his breeches with both his hands as he rose from his armchair. "I would appoint able judges at every avenue of my metropolis, which should take cognizance of every fool's business who came there, and if, upon a fair and candid hearing, it appeared not of weight sufficient to leave his own home, and come up bag and baggage, with his wife and children, farmers' sons, etc., etc., at his backside, they should all be sent back, from constable to constable, like vagrants as they were, to the place of their legal settlements. By this means I shall take care that my metropolis tottered not through its own weight, that the head be no longer too big for the body, that the extremes now wasted and pined in be restored to their due share of nourishment, and regain with it their natural strength and beauty. I would effectually provide that the meadows and cornfields of my dominions should laugh and sing, that good cheer and hospitality flourish once more, and that such weight and influence be put thereby into the hands of the squirrelity of my kingdom, as should counterpoise what I perceive my nobility are now taking from them. Why are there so few palaces and gentlemen's seats?" he would ask with some emotion as he walked across the room, "throughout so many delicious provinces in France? Whence is it that the few remaining châteaux amongst them are so dismantled, so unfurnished, and in so ruinous and desolate a condition? Because, sir," he would say, "in that kingdom no man has any country interest to support. The little interest of any kind which any man has anywhere in it is concentrated in the court and the looks of the grand monarch, by the sunshine of whose countenance, or the clouds which pass across it, every French man lives or dies." Another political reason which prompted my father so strongly to guard against the least evil accident in my mother's lying in the country was, that any such instance would infallibly throw a balance of power, too great already, into the weaker vessels of the gentry, in his own or higher stations, which, with the many other usurped rights which that part of the constitution was hourly establishing, would in the end prove fatal to the monarchical system or domestic government established in the first creation of things by God. In this point he was entirely of Sir Robert Filmer's opinion, that the plans and institution of the greatest monarchies in the eastern parts of the world were originally all stolen from that admirable pattern and prototype of this household and paternal power, which for a century, he said, and more, had gradually been degenerating away into a mixed government, the form of which, however desirable in great combinations of the species, was very troublesome in small ones, and seldom produced anything that he saw but sorrow and confusion. For all these reasons, private and public put together, my father was for having the man midwife by all means, my mother by no means. My father begged and entreated. She would for once recede from her prerogative in this matter, and suffer him to choose for her. My mother, on the contrary, insisted upon her privilege in this matter to choose for herself, and have no mortal's help but the old woman's. What could my father do? He was almost at his wit's end, talked it over with her in all moods, placed his arguments in all lights, argued the matter with her like a Christian, like a heathen, like a husband, like a father, like a patriot, like a man. My mother answered everything only like a woman, which was a little hard upon her, for as she could not assume and fight it out behind such a variety of characters, 'twas no fair match, 'twas 7-1. What could my mother do? She had the advantage, otherwise she had been certainly overpowered, of a small reinforcement of chagrin personal at the bottom which bore her up, and enabled her to dispute the affair with my father with so equal an advantage, that both sides sung Te Deum. In a word, my mother was to have the old woman, and the operator was to have licence to drink a bottle of wine with my father and my uncle Toby Shandy in the back parlour, for which he was to be paid 5 guineas. I must beg leave, before I finish this chapter, to enter a caveat in the breast of my fair reader, and it is this: not to take it absolutely for granted, from an unguarded word or two which I have dropped in it, that I am a married man. I own the tender appellation of my dear Jenny, with some other strokes of conjugal knowledge, interspersed here and there, might, naturally enough, have misled the most candid judge in the world into such a determination against me. All I plead for in this case, madam, is strict justice, and that you do so much of it, to me as well as to yourself, as not to prejudge, or receive such an impression of me till you had better evidence than I am positive at present can be produced against me. Not that I can be so vain or unreasonable, madam, as to desire you should therefore think that my dear Jenny is my kept mistress. No, that would be flattering my character in the other extreme, and giving it an air of freedom which perhaps it has no kind of right to. All I contend for is the utter impossibility for some volumes that you, or the most penetrating spirit upon earth, should know how this matter really stands. It is not impossible, but that my dear Jenny, tender as the appellation is, may be my child. Consider, I was born in the year 18. Nor is there anything unnatural or extravagant in the supposition that my dear Jenny may be my friend. Friend? My friend? Surely, madam, as friendship between the two sexes may subsist and be supported without—fie, Mrs. Shandy! Without anything, madam, but that tender and delicious sentiment which ever mixes in friendship where there is a difference of sex. Let me entreat you to study the pure and sentimental parts of the best French romances. It will really, madam, astonish you to see with what a variety of chaste expressions this delicious sentiment which I have the honour to speak of is dressed out. Chapter 18